When we hear the word caste, most of us think religion, purity, and even karma. But what if in the next 10 minutes I could show you that caste did not start with religion at all? Today, we will go deep into the origin of caste itself. And here is the key idea. Religion shaped caste later, but it was not the root. The earliest caste structures were not about the divine, they were about labor, inheritance, and control. They existed before priests got involved, and they survived after religion has changed. So the question is, if caste can survive without religion, then what really holds it together? This is a part 2 of my series on the caste system. In part 1, I looked at how semi-caste structures emerge in non-South Asian societies. For a full understanding of where this series is going and how this video helps with that, I highly recommend watching it. The link will be in the description. So let's begin. But before we look at the genesis itself, what do we even mean by caste? There are 3 terms relevant to describe phenomenon: caste, varna, and jati. Caste is of European origin from the Spanish casta. When the Portuguese arrived in India in 1498, they began using it to describe the many social groups they encountered. The next term is varna, a purely religious concept first found in the Vedas. Traditionally, there are 4 varnas and those who are excluded from them. Varna is linked to ritual purity and regulated who could participate in religious practices. I fully agree with this interpretation because in early Indian society, Varna was limited to the sphere of ritual and hardly regulated everyday life. Some scholars used Varna to describe caste, but to me, Varna is too general and too rooted in religious doctrine. Accepting it as a base for the modern caste system implies a religious origin, which is not entirely accurate. Jati is more complex. Originally, it refers to small craft-based groups. Within a single village, multiple jati could coexist, speaking the same language, yet varying in social status and sometimes even genetic backgrounds. Some shared ancestry and culture, while others reflected migration or occupational differentiation. In rare cases, jati referred to small ethnic groups tied to specific production, like nomadic cattle herders or fishers. This model works for local societies, but with national-scale globalization, jati was used for vast groups. For instance, washer castes that migrated and developed variation were still classified under one jati, often by name alone, literally a surname in the context of South Asia. This creates confusion over scale. Modern legal language reflects this ambiguity. The Indian constitution used caste in English and jati in Hindi. It seems hard for India to let go of the term caste, and I feel the same. So I prefer to use the term caste, a group with endogamy, fixed labor heredity, reflecting social stratification. So how did the genesis itself occur? Here I will base my argumentation on the works of historians such as Romila Thapar, Mysore Srinivas, and Marxist sociologist Akshay Desai. I will mention the works in the description. I think they are significant figures in Indian history and sociology. Still, this does not mean that I always and completely agree with the opinions of these scientists, but they provide very serious arguments on today's topic. The first form of caste organization in India did not arise as a religious system at all, but as a stable economic structure. In ancient and medieval India, as in feudal Europe or imperial China, professions were inherited. The son of blacksmith became a blacksmith. This ensured stability in pre-industrial society with limited resources and low mobility. However, in South Asia, this division of labor took on a more rigid and durable form. Many castes originated from tribes, guilds, and sects. It was not an ethnic or clan affiliation, but primarily an economic one. Each family in the village occupied a strictly defined niche: a plowman, a tanner, a weaver, a shepherd. In the Indian village, under conditions of high population density and limited land, professions were already distributed. There were no vacancies, and changing occupations meant conflict. Therefore, fixedness ensured stability. Still almost like in medieval Europe, right? But unlike Europe, where the centralized state gradually destroyed labor heredity, in India the weakness of the state did not allow caste to be replaced by control mechanisms. So it was the economic religious feature that took on the role of the state in Indian villages. And now it was the caste that regulated marriage, inheritance, sanctions, and behaviors. That is how these groups became endogamous, isolated socially and only later ritually fixed. This is how economic specialization turned into social stratification. And only after the economic necessity of fixing professions did the extensive ritualization of castes begin. Castes were distributed into Varna system post factum. Perhaps only among the religious professions themselves did the genesis of castes occur on the basis of religion. So by now, you could come to understand the genesis of the caste system in the Hindu religion. But what only adds to the argument in favor of economic origin is the presence and adoption of the caste system by Muslims in South Asia. Although Islam preaches the equality of all believers, Indian Muslim communities have historically reproduced caste-like hierarchies. As sociologist Imtiaz Ahmad, who studies Muslim societies in South Asia, notes, Muslim society in India shows social distance, endogamy, and occupational segregation remarkably similar to Hindu society. This structure cannot be explained by Islamic theology, but makes sense economically. The case of Pashtuns further proves this. Traditionally structured through tribal codes in Afghanistan, Pashtun migrants to India often adopted caste-like forms of social stratification. In Indo-Muslim cities and villages, their internal hierarchy was absorbed into the broader caste logic. Caste, then, is not uniquely a Hindu phenomenon. It is a durable system of economic control and social organization that transcends religion. So, if even Islam could not prevent caste, what does that say about its true foundations? In conclusion, castes emerge as a response of local societies to weak centralization of power in the villages of South Asia. Classic for almost any medieval societies with limited resources, in this case primarily free land, hereditary professions received rooting and religious superstructure. Only after this process was an ideological basis developed to support the established economic relations. But still, being economic in its essence, the system was able to easily cross the barrier of religion, which was not its main factor, by moving on to other religions. Now we have already analyzed how castes and semi-castes can be formed outside of South Asia, and therefore do not have a purely regional character. Today we analyze the order of factors in the genesis of caste, highlighting the main and the first one, economic. It remains only to compare caste and non-caste societies, perhaps finding there not so important differences after all. This will be considered in the next part. In order not to miss it, subscribe to my channel and do not forget to like this video. Perhaps you can already see how my work differs from what most of history YouTubers offers. I am not a blogger in the usual sense. I'm trying to prove that it is possible to bring serious, structured, academic-level content to the internet without turning it into popular science or entertainment. I believe viewers are capable of engaging with complex ideas. But it takes time, research, and focus to make content like this. If you, like me, want to see more thought-provoking and in-depth history analysis online, you can support this project on Patreon. There is just one tier, $3 per month. That's it. No extra, no hidden content. Just a way to say this idea and this kind of work matters. Goodbye.